Chapter 11. On a bus to Kabul, I squeezed in with my fellow passengers. 2 wooden benches extended across the length of the bus to provide seating. In the middle, dozens of chickens flapped their wings, scattering feathers in the air and clucking loudly. Roosters called out, flapping their wings and expanding their chests. Goats poked about for something to eat, while a few sheep clustered around their owner, bleating wildly. The animals brought with them swarming flies and other exotic insects. A sociable goat stared me right in the eyes as if pleading for charity. Then with great enthusiasm he chewed on the cuff of my pants, which must have been delicious, as another goat soon joined him to chew the other cuff. A chicken then jumped onto my lap and pecked at my thighs. This portable barnyard was a daily affair for the passengers, who stared at me and offered smiles. Perhaps they were experiencing a type of culture shock, too, seeing a strange creature like me, dressed in gray pinstripe jeans, my gray turtleneck, and long wavy hair. The bus stopped, and all the human passengers poured out into the desert, where they laid down their prayer rugs and offered prayers toward the holy city of Mecca. Only the animals and I remained on the bus. I had once read that humans without a spiritual path are like 2-legged animals. Though I had been exploring and learning about many different religions, I still felt I had no one clear path. While the devout Muslims prayed outside, I felt I was among my colleagues in the bus. Once the imperial capital of the Mughal Empire, Kabul was a beautiful city. High on a mountainous plateau, surrounded by snow-covered peaks. I knew it was the capital and most important city in Afghanistan. Here I reunited with Jeff and Ramsey. They had already been in Kabul for about a week and were eager to continue the journey down the famous Grand Trunk Road to India. We planned to travel across the Khyber Pass together into Pakistan. Early one morning, we set out for the bus stand where Jeff bought our tickets. Before boarding, however, all passengers were required to present their documents to immigration officials who stood outside the bus. Jeff and Ramsey stood before me in line, and after passing through the formalities, they boarded the bus. But when my turn came, there was a stir of confusion. One official snatched my passport and dragged me into the immigration office. To my dismay, the bus driver revved the engine and roared off, taking my ticket with him. Jeff and Ramsey had carried it on the bus, not realizing I'd been left behind. Another immigration official, it turned out, had mistakenly written the wrong date for my departure. Realizing their mistake, they released me. Stranded alone in Kabul, I wondered how to proceed. It was unthinkable to hitchhike alone through the Khyber Pass, infamous as one of the most lawless lands on earth. I had heard frightening stories during my travels about this borderland between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Stories of foreboding cliffs and warlike tribes who accepted no law. Like the denizens of the Old West of America, they settled disputes with loaded rifles and shootouts, and accepted killing and banditry as a way of life. I had heard stories of tourist buses being stopped at gunpoint, passengers being robbed and sometimes killed, and how bus companies had to pay the tribal leaders to protect their buses from such violence. I did not know how true these stories were, but certainly this was no place to find out. What was I to do now? I had no money to purchase a bus ticket. Alone, I walked the streets of Kabul, wondering about my destiny. The day passed in this way. With the night came the freezing cold. I had no warm clothes and nowhere to go. The full moon was like a block of ice. Trembling, I sat down on a lonely roadside, closed my eyes in meditation, lifted my harmonica to my lips, and poured out a song from my heart. Sometime later, when I opened my eyes, a shapely young woman stood in front of me, her dark blonde hair flying in the cold wind. She looked upon me with pity. "Aren't you freezing here in the middle of the night without proper clothing?" she asked. She shivered as she gazed at me with sparkling blue eyes, and I told her what had happened to me. "I'm from Holland," she answered tenderly, "but I have been living in Kabul for several years. You may come to my home and keep warm tonight." Grateful, I followed her. From the frigid street outside, she escorted me through a door into a warm, beautiful room. Bedecked with gold and green curtains, it contained a white sofa and a fine dining table with chairs. She welcomed me to sit on the soft sofa. This was like nothing I had experienced since leaving my family home in Highland Park, which seemed like ages ago. The Dutch woman invited me to the dinner table, where she served warm bread with butter, baked vegetables, and chocolate cake for dessert. I considered how it may have been a hidden blessing that I missed the bus. After some casual discussion, she invited me to sleep. "You must be terribly tired after sitting in the cold for so long." She led me across the room where there were 2 beds. "Here's your bed. I'll sleep in my bedroom." Suddenly, from another room, a giant of a man appeared. My hostess introduced him. "This is my bodyguard. He's an Afghani warrior, obedient to me." I looked upon this gargantuan figure standing before me. He was about 6'4", with a body like a mountain, each limb bulging muscles like boulders. His long, oily hair was black as coal, and an unkempt beard covered his face. I sat down on my bed, and the Afghani warrior sat down on the other. Squinting, his pitch-black eyes pierced mine. He then stretched his fists above his head with a prolonged, growling yawn, his body radiating with the stench of sweat. My hostess continued, "He is my protector. I have seen him crush a man's skull with one blow of his fist. You may now sleep." She crossed the room to an adjoining room. Before disappearing through a beaded curtain, she switched off the light. "I will go into my bedroom now." The Afghani warrior was my roommate, and oddly enough, I felt safe with him by my side. The house was so warm and comfortable that as I lay my weary body in bed, I felt fortunate. How would I have survived the freezing night if this friendly woman had not taken pity on me. Pulling up the soft blanket, I savored the experience as I drifted into sleep. Minutes later, I awoke to my hostess parting the beaded curtain between our rooms. She was wearing only a transparent silk nightgown. Incense burned and soft music played. She approached my bed and spoke sweet words into my ear. "You are so young and good." Her eyes were glazed with passion. Slipping off her gown, she presented to me her naked body. And then, wrapping her arms around me, she laid her perfumed body over mine. Bewildered, I struggled to focus on the purpose of my journey. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't want this. Please let me sleep," I pleaded. Undaunted, she tried to arouse me in various ways. "Please leave me alone," was all I could say. Tormented, I lay there like a dead, cold fish. In a frenzy of passion, she whispered in my ear, "If you don't satisfy my desire, my bodyguard will crush your skull. You can't escape." Scorned, she cried for his help. The warrior sprang from his bed, bounded across the room, and stood over us. "Submit or die. Submit, submit or die," he growled. My mind was reeling. As my seductress continued her efforts to overcome me, I lay under her, trembling. Meanwhile, the Afghani warrior towered over us. He yanked my hair and roared, "Submit or die, submit or die." The words were like bombs exploding in my head. Questions rushed through my mind. Was this a nightmare? Must I surrender to her or die? Why was this happening to me? In a flash, with all my strength, I heaved the woman off me, grabbed my bag and shoes, and raced to the door, leaving my sleeping bag behind. She screamed. The bodyguard roared and lunged to capture me, but I dodged him. With all my might, I bolted through that door and burst into the street. The warrior was close behind. Seething with wrath, he wailed. I ran without once turning back, terrorized by the thought of his mammoth fist crushing through my fragile skull. I ran and ran and ran. Somehow, I escaped. Once again, I was alone, with nowhere to go, in the middle of the night. As I wandered the deserted streets of Kabul, I realized that the freezing cold night that I had previously dreaded was now providing shelter to me. The icy moon that had chilled me to the bone was radiating warmth that nourished my weary mind. Walking with no direction, I was free. Gazing into the stars, I contemplated the powers of passion. Sex could be a gift of God, but when it becomes an obsession, it plunders all intelligence, and people are driven to abominable acts to satisfy their lust. When passion is frustrated, people lose all good sense. I thought about the fact that throughout history there had been saints in all traditions who raised beautiful families utilizing sex as a divine offering. Then I began to wonder why, throughout the same history, many saints took the vow of celibacy. The more I pondered, the more I tried to answer my own question. Maybe they realized the charm of the opposite sex to be a distraction from their exclusive dedication to God. Maybe they were determined to direct that powerful energy toward prayer and devotion. Maybe this was what I too was looking for. Certainly, it would explain why I had turned my back on Irene in Italy. Love is the offering of the heart, I thought. Pure love must be selfless, without selfish motives. As the full moon rose higher over Kabul, casting rays on the mountains, a vow arose in my heart to remain celibate for the remainder of my life. Embraced by the bitter cold wind, I prayed to God to help me to keep my commitment. As the sun rose above the panoramic mountains of Kabul, I hurried to the bus stand, wondering what the future would hold. To my relief, Jeff had sent my ticket back with the returning bus driver. He included a little money as well. Before boarding the bus, I turned to look upon the city of Kabul one final time. On this mountainous plateau of Afghanistan, I had taken a significant step on my internal journey toward enlightenment, praying to accept a difficult vow that I was determined to follow. I felt deeply grateful. Through my window, steep cliffs arose in an arid land. On the slopes, poor farmers toiled to grow a few sparse crops. Clearly, the rugged desert mountains secluded these people of the Khyber Pass in their own world. The local people toted rifles on their shoulders, and some slung straps of bullets around their chests for protection. As the bus jounced along, we passed ammunition factories where primitive rifles were made available to all. At a distance, I saw long caravans of camels with cargo strapped to their backs, sauntering along the dusty paths. The bus jerked and rattled over potholes, straining forward through the Khyber Pass. As I peered out the window, I could picture Alexander the Great on his march to invade India in the 4th century BC. Genghis Khan's bloody Mongol invasions here in the 13th century. Massive Mughal armies led by their emperors marching through to conquer and plunder the subcontinent, and British soldiers being slaughtered by the tribesmen. For generations, bloodshed and death had been daily affairs for the local Pashtun tribes. Although the struggle for survival took its toll on tribal members' faces, they appeared also to be stamped with a type of austere grace. Remembering all the ghastly tales about them, I now felt happy to honor these people through my bus window. In the evening, the bus let us out in Peshawar, Pakistan. My curiosity led me to a tranquil old woman in a black veil sitting on the footpath. In front of her, she spread a piece of burlap cloth on which she displayed varieties of trinkets. I stepped closer to see what this grandmotherly soul was selling. Brass knuckles. She was selling brass knuckles, studded with razor-sharp spikes designed to penetrate flesh and rip it apart on extraction. These weapons of cruelty were ornamented with semi-precious jewels. She directed me to press a hidden button on the brass knuckles, and when I did, whoosh, A blade shot out. My head reeled. The old woman insisted that I bargain with her, but I politely went on my way. India was only one country away now. I eagerly continued my travel overland to the ancient city of Lahore to receive my Indian visa. On the way, I met some kind people who extended themselves to make me feel at home in Pakistan, providing meals and rides in trucks or buses. Early one morning, I waited outside the Indian embassy in Lahore. Large hawks circled overhead in the clear sky. When the embassy doors finally opened, I entered and timidly presented my passport to the official. When he stamped it, my heart rejoiced. I felt as if it were a visa to God's kingdom. India was a step away now. The land of yogis, lamas, and sages was waiting.